I signed on for. In going through whatever it is, when you think about someone that you've known forever and ever, trying to figure out the pertinent pieces of that person that are relevant here was not an easy chore, particularly with Tommy. And I wrote down just some thoughts. A life full of spirit, brilliant, complex, eclectic, passionate, curmudgeon-y. He was a puzzle piece. He adored this island. And I remember the first time I saw him, he was 9 years my senior. I had a brother who was a dear friend of his he was 6 years my senior. But I was at Leona's, why I was at the bar, age 13 or 14. Well, I do know why, because Leona's daughter, Luella, was my best friend, and we had been skinny dipping that night off Leona's dock. It was cold, 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 as you all know it can be, wrapped in a towel. Both of us had towels on, and we came back up to the back side of the bar, and Tommy was out there. The only, and I don't know why, the only facilities at the bar were, it was an outhouse, so perhaps that's why he was behind the house. But anyway, he wouldn't stop talking to us, and we were phrasing, and that's my first memory of Tom Vennum. And then we were friends from then on, well, as I got older from then on. But I think what I can bring in terms of a memory of information about Tommy was the first contact that he had with Bill Baker at Lakuta Ray. And that still, I can remember that day as though it were yesterday. In his book, Just Too Much of an Indian, he talks about that day being January of '69. When he speaks of it in his monologue, Four Ojibwe War Dances, what grew out of his contact with Bill. This is January '68. I'm going to go with '68. It was the January 1st. Mama was living here on the island. Tommy came from wherever, I think he was teaching at the time. And, no, he was at Harvard, and he was doing his doctorate. And he was doing that, I believe, in organ music. And he came home to the island for New Year's and for that period of time during his break, contacted Mother and said, I know Mimi in the previous year or so had been a social worker in the 9 northern counties of Wisconsin, which I had been. I was the only social worker doing the work I was working. And I he said, I think she's had contact with Native people. I would like to know if she knows anybody at Lakuta Ray. So we got in my Volkswagen, which was heated by gas, and it was 10 below, and we drove to Hayward. He contacted Tony Wise, who was a businessman there in those years, who was a friend of Tommy's dad, and Tony Wise put him in touch with, or gave him the name of a man by the name of Jim Mustache. We literally went to Jim Mustache's house and then went to other homes as they recommended, oh, there might be a singer there. Finally, and it's beautifully described, this is my favorite book of his, it's beautifully described, that process and contacting Bill Baker, who opened up the world for Tommy. And Bill, speaking of curmudgeons, he was cranky, and Tommy couldn't, he said, can I record you? He said, no. Tommy said, well, will you talk to me? Will you sing? Yeah, all right. I don't know, why are you here? And Mother and I were driving back and forth in the car to keep warm. It was about an hour and a half in the middle of, for us, nowhere. But then Bill Baker agreed that Tommy could come back the next day, and Tommy did. And it opened up the world that Tommy had sensed was there but had not been a part of. And then he wrote this wonderful monograph, 4 Ojibwe Songs and Dances. And that was the start of his interest in ethno, or at least it solidified his interest in ethnomusicology. I can't stress enough the wonder of this book, because it really gives a feeling of Tommy's view of what he was doing and what he wanted to do. I had to keep a chronology because when I started this, I thought, oh, this will be easy. No, it isn't. This was a man who went to Haiti to record music. This was a man who went among Seri native people in Mexico and southern United States. I mean, he immersed himself in whatever he was doing, and I was talking to Beth, and she reminded me that, yes, Tommy also had a thing about, what was it? Bullfighting. And he would go all over the world to bullfights. His interest in things was endless. So, anyway, he had this wonderful beginning with the 4 Ojibwe war dance songs, and it took him into a new world. He also, I found, he wrote everything out, and he would send me these things. And he wrote something about a trip to a town in Haiti, and the note was, once you read it, do you think you want to go? And I would get these monographs from him out of the blue. It was whatever he was interested in. But at one point he was interested in the Chippewa flowage in 1971 regarding a dam takeover of the LCO reservation. And Bill Baker was very much involved in this. So he has a paper about that. And then he did, in 1978, Journal of Society for Ethnomusicology, he did a review of recordings, Chippewa, and then songs of the Chippewa. And then in 1982, Ojibwe Dance Drum was published, written, published. And after that, 1988, Wild Rice and the Ojibwe People. And then, because I found the strangest things going through my father's things, found this in my dad's things, and stuff that Tommy hid. Here in 1993, he sends a request to my father for money for the pipe organ here on the island, and I'll read it. Part of the funds are being sought to replace the present non-functioning pipe organ with a new instrument, so that the congregation, the church can once again provide proper accompaniment for congregational singing. With a master's degree in organ from the New England Conservatory, as well as 15 years experience as an organist and choir director, I was asked last year to advise the organ committee on directions they might consider taking. The man's interest and ability was endless. Oh, by the way, my dad did contribute. And see, I know Tommy here. I didn't know him at the Smithsonian. All I knew was the contact I had here. Once in a while, we did take a drive, and we were going to take Jerry Dunn in Tommy's VW, and we were driving, I don't even remember when it was, in the 60s, some late 60s. We were gonna drive from here to New York.
I remember that.
And we were gonna take Jerry Dunn and his tuba in a Volkswagen Bug. Thank God, Jerry, you decided not to go, because I know where the hell I was gonna sit, in the back with the tuba. But that was the kind of thing, and then we drove straight through. It was the kind of thing that Tommy would do. He was just absolutely marvelous. In 1994, he wrote Lacrosse, Little Brother of War. And when I'm sort of done with what I'm saying, Beth is gonna give us a rundown of how that took place. In about 97, Tommy had a very debilitating stroke in DC and was in the ICU for, as I recall, about a month. But even after that, he was so incredibly productive. The Earl Nyholm canoe was built right down here, and that was in 98. The Smithsonian Folk Life Festival had something about it, so it was sometime around 98, 99. A DVD was done on that wonderful, wonderful creation. And then in 2007, he wrote Lacrosse, The Legends. And then 2008, my favorite book, Just Too Much of an Indian, Bill Baker, Stalwart in a Failing Culture. And the significance of these two books is that he wrote them after his debilitating, just eviscerating stroke. I don't know how he could manage, but he did. And then I found he had a protege at the Smithsonian by the name of Guha Shankar, a lovely, lovely man. And I remember I've seen Guha here a couple of times. Anyway, he writes, much of Tom's experiences and knowledge were accumulated over 4 decades while in the employ of the early variants of the present-day Center for Folk Life and Cultural Heritage. He had a raucous sense of humor, prodigious scholarly credentials, accomplishments, and teaching, intentional or not, touched in some instances profoundly shaped our lives. His meticulous research, his in the field and in archives, his musical and cultural traditions, Ojibwe, combat songs in Haiti, Seri music from the US and Mexico borderlands. He was the supervising editor for the pioneering monograph film series Smithsonian Folklife Studies. He was a piano player. It went on and on and on. And I remember, and I couldn't find the magazine, the Folklife magazine, Festival of American Folklife. He's got an article in here, American Indian Problems of Access and Cultural Continuity. That was in 1989. In 1998, he was in this wonderful magazine, which had a whole section on Wisconsin. The enduring craftsmanship of Wisconsin's native peoples, the Ojibwe birch bark canoe, and that would be Earl Nyholm. But he also, I remember one of these, where he brought Leona and Cigar Nelson to this. And I don't remember what they were there for, but I'm sure it was absolutely wonderful. So I will read this little bit. No, I don't need to. Anyway, it's the beginning of Tommy's love, interest, absorption, possession of Ojibwe music to begin with, and then on into other ethnomusicology fields. And that's really my connection with Tommy. I don't know anything about his time except for what Gua has read or what I read in his time at the Smithsonian, but I think he was there for at least 20 years. I'm glad he's back here in Greenwood, where he's safe and sound. He was a wonderful dear friend. Not always easy, but a wonderful dear friend.
And you were too.
Well,
To him.
I don't know. Oh, I will tell the story about our renting. We sold our mother's house and we needed a place to rent. And Tommy had built his house on Sunset Bay, so my sister and I said, we want to rent and we want to pay you. And he said, okay. So we would invite him as a guest. And he said, well, I want my bedroom. We said, no, that's the best bedroom we get. You have to sleep down at the end of the house in a guest room. 3 years we did that, and at the end of the 3rd year, he looked at us and he said, I am not renting to you bitches ever again. That was our Tommy. So on that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Beth, if I may.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Everybody can hear me okay, I don't need a mic, right? I just want to, Kip, our middle son, and Tommy became really good friends through lacrosse. And my understanding is that Tommy became interested in lacrosse, as he did in Wild Rice, through music. And through his study and interest in the traditions surrounding the music, that, you know, the drumming that would happen during the ricing ceremonies and also during the lacrosse ceremonies. And from that, he understood that the wood used for many of those drums was the same wood used to make lacrosse sticks. And so that then catapulted him into becoming really the lacrosse scholar whose books we now have. So I'm just going to read from an article that Kip published, or had published in USA Lacrosse, called Tom Vennum, U.S. Lacrosse's Unlikely Historian. Tom wrote the first comprehensive history of the game, American Indian Lacrosse, Little Brother of War. Through his research and advocacy, he befriended major figures in both collegiate and native lacrosse, like Roy Simmons Jr., Orrin Lyons, the Powell brothers, and Onondaga stickmaker Alfie Jacques. As a senior ethnocologist at the Smithsonian, Tom published widely on native lacrosse and lectured at coaches' conferences around the country. He was just as likely to be found on the sidelines of the nearest lacrosse field through hectoring young players about the importance of the wooden stick. Tom came to lacrosse not through sports, but through music. He was a lifelong student of the piano and organ, and after encountering Native American drumming while pursuing a doctorate in music at Harvard, discovered a deep affinity for indigenous cultures. He went